and welcome to today's NEASC Virtual Global Forum, Student Social Emotional Health, Perspectives, Pathways, and Possibilities. My name is Allison Geary, Deputy Director of the NEASC Commission on Public Schools. With me today is Jim Mooney, Deputy Director for the Commission on Independent Schools. Today, we will look at the social and emotional health of students through the lens of 3 distinct schools. We hope that their shared experiences will provide helpful examples for building skills within your school communities to support and sustain positive emotional climates. We've got a lot to cover, so I'd like to hand things over to my co-host, Jim, to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you to the panelists for being here. Looking forward to this conversation. This has been a critical topic over the years, not just a pandemic-related topic, and that is working with kids, supporting kids as they travel through their educational experience. What's also interesting, and it's a whole nother webinar, is that adults are also struggling with social emotional issues. So this is a perfect and timely presentation that we have today, and I appreciate your taking the time. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly to those that have chosen to attend. Tell us a bit of work and what your role is as it relates to social emotional support for students. I will direct you through this based on where you show up on my screen. So I'd like to start with Jason.
Good morning. My name is Jason Strinesty. I serve as principal of Bishop Girton High School, which is located in Nashua, New Hampshire. We're a Catholic independent school sponsored by the Brothers of the Sacred Heart. We're part of a nationwide and worldwide network of schools. We have about 800 students in grades 9 through 12. We're a co-educational school. And if I were to summarize my role as principal, I think it is balance. Normally, under normal circumstances, it's about balancing rigorous academics and a whole person mission. It's balancing college preparation and preparation for life. It's balancing asking students to challenge themselves outside their comfort zone, but also finding support and self-care opportunities. Under normal circumstances, it's the principal's role to make sure the issue of mental health and well-being is continually raised in a school and to make sure that that's a safe conversation to have. And even this year, it's about finding a balance between physical safety and student education and mental health. So my role is to make sure that these times we're establishing, communicating, and implementing that balance in a prudent way. And on this call is Jeff Levin of the Reconnection Project, and we've worked with him over the years as well on this issue. So good morning.
Good morning. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Jim, thanks. When email came out, I told my wife, I don't want to use email, it's too distracting, but now I'm enjoying seeing all the people from all over the world in the chat. So welcome to everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I have been working with kids Monday through Friday for 40 years since 1980. I started as a middle school or junior high school teacher in Carlisle, Mass, then later got a clinical social work degree and worked in a variety of venues with young people. And today I'm with my wife and some colleagues, co-founder of this Reconnection Project, which seeks to lower kid anxiety by working with the 3 legs of the stool, the parents, the educators, and the children. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I have worked a lot with Jason down in Nashua at Bishop Girton. And thanks for inviting me, Jim.
You're very welcome. Tricia, please introduce yourself.
Sure thing. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tricia Puglisi. I'm the principal at Manchester Essex Regional High School. We're a small public high school north of Boston in Massachusetts. As the principal, I see my role as leading with empathy, providing support to students and to teachers. Social emotional health of students has been kind of front and center for me for a very long time, having had a child that had some difficulties going to school and, learning the strategies myself as a parent and also as an educator. 4 years ago, we had Mark Brackett come to our school district from the Yale Center. for social emotional learning and health. And his speech to our staff resonated with everybody about the importance of really supporting our students. Since then, we have implemented the Yale Center ruler program, which Nikki will be talking about a little bit, and you'll hear us reference throughout this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Holly, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Holly Brabson, and I work with Tricia Puglisi at Manchester Essex Regional High School, grades 9 through 12, and my role there is a school adjustment counselor. That's what we call us in Massachusetts, but in other parts of the country and the world, they might be called the school clinician or the school social worker. So my role and daily job is working with students, both regular education students and students who are in special education, to address their clinical and mental health needs. So the social emotional learning piece fits right at home for me, having worked in mental health on an outpatient basis before I started working in schools about 12 years ago. We were lucky enough, as Tricia just said, to go to Yale and receive the ruler training. And it just really struck a chord with me. I felt like I was home there. And then to be able to bring it back to teachers and teach them the skills and the importance of social emotional learning in the classroom, and how when kids feel safe and comfortable and understood and heard, their ability to learn just improves tremendously. So it's this program and just the acknowledgement of the importance of social emotional learning has had a positive impact on our school community. And I'm excited to be here, so welcome everybody.
Thank you, Holly. I'm going to go to you, Joe.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Elbertson, and I am a teacher at Kolbe Cathedral High School here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I cover courses mainly in music. So I am a teacher trade, but I also have taught drama and personal wellness to our incoming freshmen and transfer students, which gives me a great opportunity to work with kids and use SEL approaches and strategies, especially ruler, which my by far better half, Nikki, will talk about later. And with that, it's a great opportunity for me to work with kids in a creative manner where I can help them express themselves through singing, through creating music, through writing song lyrics, both secular and sacred levels. And, to get to use ruler and, other strategies in mindfulness and as well. Kids learn about their feelings and how how can be successful by managing their feelings and develop strategies to to be the best that they can with whatever challenges they have or with whatever is good in their life. Before I started teaching, I was 10 years in health and human services at residential treatment facilities for severe conduct disorder children, which was very challenging, rewarding, but I think really gave me some big blocks and some goals as to where I want to be with my life. So that's it, and looking to hearing everyone talk today and being with you today.
Great, thank you, Joe. Nikki, if you would introduce yourself, and then I'm going to come right back to you, Nikki, and we'll continue with an overview of what you're doing at Yale. So, Nikki.
Hi there, welcome everyone, great to be here. My name is Nicole Elbertson. I am the Director of Content and Communications at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. I'm coming up on my 19-year anniversary in just a couple of months, so almost 2 decades of working with school and district leaders and educators like Holly and Trisha on emotional intelligence skills and the work that we do as adults for our own emotional intelligence and how we show up to school each day, and the work we do with our students. And I have a unique window into the perspectives of all of the adults and students working in school communities as a trainer and a coach through the last couple of decades. And this past year has been an interesting one, as you all know. But welcome, great to be here.
Great, thank you, Nikki. I had asked before the call that Nikki be the first one to frame the issue as it relates to social and emotional health of our kids, mostly by nature of the scope of how many schools Yale has touched with their program. The way this webinar is organized is that we have leaders of the school plus those that are in the trenches, so to speak, implementing. So we'll have a chance to look at the big picture and look at what it's like on a day-to-day basis. To sort of frame and to give an overarching perspective, Nikki, I'm turning back to you.
Okay, great. And I will share my screen. I just have a couple of slides here. So it's something that you may have heard before is life is an emotional roller coaster. And we say that all the time in the past couple of decades, as we've been working with a couple thousand of schools across the nation, across the world. But now more than ever, an emotional roller coaster of ups and downs and all over the place with our emotions. And just in terms of some of the research that we've done at our center, but also with our partners in the field of social and emotional learning, we've found that about a quarter of teens in this past year have said they've lost their self-confidence. About a quarter of public school students have disappeared from educational context. And compared to just a couple of years ago, adults in the United States were, in the past year, were 8 times more likely to report serious mental distress and 3 times more likely to report moderate or serious distress. And in terms of the educators in our school communities, this is how they typically feel. We've done a lot of studies through the years on we ask at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, we ask pretty often, how are you feeling? And this is what we get. And if you're not familiar with this sort of image, the bigger words represent the feelings that people feel the most. So on average, educators in the United States feel stressed, frustrated, and overwhelmed. But this is how educators are feeling in the past year with all of the changes due to the pandemic, with the switches from virtual to hybrid to distance learning. So the main feeling is anxiety. And if you know anything about anxiety, you know that anxiety is about uncertainty. And there's been so much uncertainty in the past year. So that's been the primary emotion. And you see stressed, worried, uncertain, frustrated, confused. So a lot of unpleasant emotions people are experiencing in the last year, even more so than the average day in a school community as an adult. And what about the kids? So the students, and this is from kindergarten through high school, this is how they typically feel. They feel tired. That's the number one thing. And it's a busy world and we have lots of screens tiring us out all the time, lots of things that make us feel sort of exhausted when we come to school as both students and adults. So that's the number one thing. But they also have felt bored, stressed, angry, nervous. You do see some good things in there too, happy, excited, safe. But that was in the past, over the past few years. But in the past year, this is what they're feeling: bored, frustrated. You see that anxiety again coming up, angry, happy. And why does all of this matter? One of the core things that we teach at the Center for Emotional Intelligence is that emotions matter. They affect pretty much everything we do. So as adults and as students, emotions affect how we pay attention, what we remember, what we learn. That's really important in school. So if a student is feeling really anxious, are they going to be able to pay attention to what we're teaching them as the adults in the room? Emotions affect our decisions. So when we're in a really good mood, we might say yes more often. In fact, we have a study that shows that when teachers are grading, when they're in a bad mood versus a good mood, they grade about 2 letter grades lower on the same exact paper that they're grading. So emotions affect the decisions we make, the grades that we assign. And interestingly, the educators in the study said, no, of course not. My feelings don't affect my grading. And what we did is we had them think about their feelings next time before they graded another paper, a different set of educators. And what we found is if we asked them to pay attention to their emotions, then there wasn't a difference in the way that they graded. So the key point here is that when we pay attention to our emotions, we think about them before we make that decision, then we do make better decisions. Emotions affect our relationships, our physical and mental health, and just in general, how we perform and how creative we are on a day-to-day basis. And this isn't about creativity in terms of the arts and music, which is really important too, but this is about just making creative decisions and being able to think outside of the box and be able to rethink and challenge our old views. So the last thing I'll say is, if you haven't heard about Ruler, it's our programming at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. It's about the adults and the students in school communities, from the superintendents to the principals to the educators to the students in the classrooms, including their families. Ruler is the name of our approach. It's also an acronym for the 5 skills of emotional intelligence: recognizing our emotions in self and others, understanding their causes and their consequences, labeling them with a nuanced vocabulary, expressing them in ways that are helpful, and regulating them so that we show up in the world in helpful ways. So I'm going to end it there. Thanks so much. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I can share some links with you and some more information.
Great. Thank you very much, Nikki, for the introduction. Let's go now and go around panelists to address the question, or what are the major issues at your school that you're seeing among your students? And let me start with Jason.
Sorry about that. A couple quick points come to mind. First, a lot of our student stress, I think, is driven by what's actually adult stress. That if you look at our society as a whole, adults are not all that healthy from an emotional standpoint. And so we have a ambitious population of students that are looking for competitive opportunities down the road. So that generates a lot of anxiety over outcomes. The parent becomes anxious and concerned about where the student is headed, and that translates over to the student. And sometimes it comes across as micromanagement and a loss of freedom and agency on the part of the student. So in a sense, the adolescence becomes a job, and the boss on the job is pretty anxious in a way that's not always healthy. I think we also see our students are caught up in what's going on throughout our culture. There's a lot of loss of trust in institutions. There's a lot of loss of trust in role models. And so you can't point necessarily to people or organizations that a student should really role model and emulate as easily as might have been at a different time. There's always some flaw in any group or organization that's been pointed out. And so it's hard to direct students towards something to aspire to. And I think the general tone and tenor of our media and our society contributes to that there's always somebody screaming and always somebody angry. And then now with COVID, I think opportunities for anxiety even increase further. Students are oftentimes caught between conflicting messages. They come to school, we say, be careful, take COVID seriously. They might go home and have a different message at home that says, this isn't legitimate, so what do you believe? And who's the trusted adult you're gonna decide? And having to make that choice causes a lot of stress and anxiety for students. COVID brings a lot of lack of control for kids and uncertainty that they don't know if next week they're going to be shut down due to an outbreak or an exposure. There's grief for opportunities lost. There's a loss of casual social opportunities that has an impact on students' social well-being. So a couple quick points there that come to mind early on.
Good, thanks for sharing. I'm going to go to the other principal in the room, Tricia.
Sure, thank you. So we've really seen a lot of change over the last 15 to 20 years in terms of how students are presenting in front of us. And I think a lot of it stems from expectations that they have for themselves, that their parents have for them, that society has for them, that friends have for themselves. The idea of being, meeting high standards in school while also participating in sports and extracurriculars, all with that vision of getting to that next step. And I think that, kids are feeling that pressure that they need to do well to move forward. But at the same time, they are bombarded on a regular basis with images and statements on social media that contribute to that in many ways a negative way. Watching TikTok and seeing where the kids are getting into college, you're watching that, you're internalizing that to yourself, and you're like, why am I not able to do that right now? I also think family structures have changed, and that's really contributed to students' social emotional health. As was stated earlier, adults are feeling more anxious, and if a mom and dad is feeling anxious, that's being kind of transferred onto the student as well. We see a lot of that in school. And I guess in terms of COVID, what we're seeing with our students is they're feeling isolated. They're feeling detached from our school community, even though we're in a hybrid model and they have the opportunity to come into school. It's not the same. When they first came back to school, they kind of were looking around like, wait a minute, I can't sit with my friends at a lunch table and like fool around, and I have to walk this way instead of that way. And I think that has led to a great feeling of loss for our kids, that sense of normalcy isn't here right now. So again, we've been working with the Ruler program, and I'll talk more about that in the next question. But I think we found that there are ways to reach out to students to support them even during this global pandemic.
Great. Thank you for sharing. So let's go to the practitioners, those with the boots on the ground. Holly, what's it like for you from your perspective? You've heard from your boss. What do you see?
So, from the clinical perspective, working with kids on a daily basis is definitely an increase in kids presenting, feeling disconnected, using the words depressed, anxious, more parents calling and very concerned about their children in ways that they haven't before. And I think what's also, maybe it's unique to this generation, maybe it's not, but I feel from working with teenagers over the past couple of years, teenagers have amazing amounts of empathy and compassion. And when we're going through a pandemic, or kids are seeing things on social media, also things that are happening in our country around social justice issues, and around the world, our kids are very savvy. They're very well educated on what's happening, and they're very interested, and they are taking the weight of all of that's happening onto their shoulders, and they are experiencing a lot of empathy for others, sometimes not so much themselves. I'm finding that I have to work with kids on having empathy for themselves. But I find that my work is, what do you do with all this emotion and feeling that you have so you don't get stuck in it, and you can feel, take that empathy, take that compassion, and do something powerful with it. So I'm seeing a lot of kids struggling, but I'm also seeing a lot of resiliency. It's, I tell people that I have the best job in the world. Even though it's hard on some days, I get to see kids overcome and strive and to do better and rise above a lot of challenges. So that's sort of what I'm seeing right now.
Great. Thank you. Let me go to you, Joe. You are primarily a music teacher with some touch in theater, and at the same time, you're involved in the social emotional health of the students at your high school. So you bring a unique perspective. Joe.
All right, so I think that from the administrative and clinical standpoint, I think a lot of things are probably very common throughout. In the classroom setting, honestly, we have some really, really great kids here. So I'm going to sort of generalize as to what I see. Some of the things that I see from time to time are kids struggling with identity. You know, who are you? Who do I want to be? You know, what do I want to do? Types of things. We also have some issues with kids dealing with challenges and failure when something gets, you know, difficult, you know, whether it be a subject or something else. Sometimes students tend to shut down, or they'll use, you know, perhaps not the best way of coping with something. So say, you know, like failing a test, for example, if I fail a test, I might feel really upset about it. And I might want to try to do harder. And some kids struggle with that. You know, they may say, you know, I failed, and then just announce it to the class and kind of make it into a comedic moment, which can work sometimes. However, you know, that's really not the ideal way to address failure. Failure should be an opportunity to learn and to grow. And that's tough for some kids to see. I also see that with, from the performance aspect, you know, we have some pretty supportive kids at times, but they get pretty scared to sing solos and to perform in front of each other. And that's tough because, you know, I think with what's going on in the world, how we use our phones and technology and apps to kind of help us express ourselves, and we can always edit those things, having those live performances tends to be a start for some kids. Some kids not knowing what they want, you know, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to do with your life? You know, what do you want to do? And like, oh no, sometimes. And that's us as teachers. We try to reach them and to say, you know, this is what we think you're good at. This is what we think you can work on, and to try to guide them to, you know, realizing the potential. Some kids do struggle with empathy, kind of in our world. And, you know, again, I think it goes back to things like, you know, TikTok and other things where, again, I'm not blaming the apps, but we tend to use those at looking at other people's highlights and failures. And, you know, typically, if something goes wrong, sometimes it's just easy to laugh it off, or to say, you know, whatever, that's just how it is. Oh, well, you know, that's things for you. Listening skills for some folks, listening skills, you know, and I'll talk later about an activity that I do with that. But again, it tends to be hyper focused in things like social media. But when it comes to other things, sometimes perhaps not the best. And just in some of my classes previously, just getting kids to express their feelings, having the skills to control their feelings when they're not feeling their best or having challenges. We'll talk about the label of ruler at another point today, where it really gets into that, the vocabulary, the nuances, and Ruler's, you know, famous line, you got to name it to tame it, that sort of deal. And finally, like, just steps to happiness. How, you know, if I'm feeling not the best, what can I do in my life to make me happy? And some kids struggle with that, because when you ask them, it's, you know, video games or money or just being popular, which is typical, but not necessarily long lasting.
Thanks for that overview, and we will loop back to what strategies are working. Jeff, you have contact in lots of schools by nature of your work. What are your thoughts about the major issues right now facing students as it relates to social emotional health?
I think everybody has summarized quite well what I call the bombardment from social media 24/7 to global warming. But for me, the fundamental fact, if you view this psychologically, and I don't know if I can share my screen successfully, I'll try in a second, but this is a student of psychology's nightmare to see how the culture has changed as it impacts kids. I'm going to try to share the screen. and wish me luck. Have I made it?
Yep.
So this is Maslow's triangle, which we all studied in probably second year of college, but a lot of middle class and upper class kids have the bottom all set: food, water, warmth, not so much rest, because 60% of kids in America report they never get 8 hours of sleep. When you go to safety and security, and then when you go to belongingness and love, what the fundamental thing that I see is we are rushing around like crazy pre-pandemic. And the experience of time has changed. We have what I call the overwhelming tragedy list, from global warming to school shootings and things you don't want to talk about which it would appear to me the adults can't agree. The truth is now a moving target. Time has essentially disappeared. We have a new parenting playbook where we overprotect. We don't prepare. We used to think, when we grew up, everybody tells the story, we get home when the street lights come on. We experienced independence and imagination, what I call the 5 I's: independence, imagination, integrity, intestinal fortitude, all of which lead to identity, right? So whatever psychological model you use, you have to acknowledge that the kids aren't doing well. And a lot of us adults aren't doing well. It's really a crisis. Device addiction and so on. And then what you mentioned, Jim, I'm in a lot of schools. What I've seen in schools is really, and schools are the place where people are just working their nails to the nub to help every kid. And I see panelists from all over the planet on this call. We need to enlist the assistance of parents. We can't be the dry cleaners where we drop our kid off and expect them to get honor roll grades and he's fine, because none of us is fine anymore. It's really a crisis, and I hate to say it. I'm just looking at my list. Kids have outcome fever. When I was 11 years old, my grandmother bought me a stereo clock radio, which was a big deal back in the 17th century. And I turned on FM radio in 1967 and heard B.B. King. And when I heard the music, I thought, my God, I said, Ma, I need an electric guitar. I was 11. She said, we'll go to Leachmere Sailors immediately. Why do you want an electric guitar? I heard B.B. King. The last thing I'll say, if you examine your childhoods versus theirs, we had time for inspiration. We had time, again, psychologically, to search for what it was we loved. I'll just share the screen real quickly one more time and see if I can do this right. This is Erickson's The 8 Ages of Man. You want to live on the left side of the verses. You want your kids to have trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, and integrity. These are hard to come by. We've been bombarded. This is a lot to try to digest, I realize. But we need new terminology. We need new models. And I'll close with this. Fundamentally, as a community of adults, parents and educators, we simply need to acknowledge we had a crisis before COVID. The numbers don't lie. The suicide rate's up almost 60% in this country. And this problem is eminently solvable if we just acknowledge it and we reconnect communities, one community at a time, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Nikki, this is as a segue into the next question. I'm really interested in specifically why the ruler program works so well. What is it about it that works? I think that we've heard from the panelists the scope of the issue, and you have one of the strategies. And I'm just, if you could share really what's the key to the success?
Great. Well, let me try to make create a concise answer to that. But I guess I would say, having done this work for so long, the way that I think about ruler in terms of its most effective pieces are that it's a mindset. It's a way of being. So just acknowledging that emotions are so important and they affect everything we do from the moment we wake up in the morning until the moment we go to bed as students and as the adults in our lives. I think that that's probably the foundation for getting through all of the emotions that we have in our lives before COVID, but also this past year. So it's a mindset. And in addition to being a mindset, which I believe is the foundation, it's a set of tools. And someone asked in the Q&A about what's something I can do to check in with my students on their emotions. And we have a tool called the Mood Meter that I'm happy to show or share. I did put a link in the Q&A. But it really just gets at like, what's going on with me right now, or what's going on with my students right now, looking at them and saying, you know, how pleasant or unpleasant do they feel? How much energy is coursing through their body? And then is that a helpful place to be given what's going on? If I'm about to take a test and my heart's racing, is that a helpful place to be? And if not, what are the strategies I can use to get myself to a place that will really work for me in this moment? And it's totally different depending on the person, depending on the context. So it's a mindset, it's a set of tools and skills. I mentioned the 5 ruler skills. And finally, if schools adopt the broad approach, it's actually a set of content. And it's content for staff development, because the adults in the lives of students are going through a lot every day. I showed all of those emotions they experience in a regular day. And then in this past year, even more of those unpleasant emotions. So it's staff development content on really practicing the skills of emotional intelligence. And then it's curricular content and just sort of little routines you can do in the classroom from early childhood all the way to high school.
That's an excellent overview. Thanks for sharing that. Let's take it across. There's the overview from Yale, and now we know specifically that some of you are implementing back on your campuses. Tricia, tell us about your perspective on what are the successful strategies that you are specifically using for your kids at your school?
Definitely, yes. I would say, you know, we're starting with the concept throughout our school community that emotions matter. We've heard that before. It's the mantra at Yale, and you have to name it to tame it. And what we've done with that is there's 4 different pillars that go along with the implementation of the ruler program. There's the charter, which I'm going to talk about how we use the mood meter. Then there's the meta moment, kind of finding your best self. And then finally, there's the blueprint to resolutions. And if we start with the charter, we have found, particularly this year, that it was a really big part of our reopening. So the charter is within a classroom, talking and making a kind of contract about how students and teachers want to feel in the classroom. So I could give an example. I watched a teacher form a charter with his math class, and you come up with words. So these kids came up with 4 words, 2 of which were challenged and successful. And so then they had a conversation. You're in a math class. If you're feeling challenged, you may not be feeling as successful at that moment. How do you kind of overcome those emotions in the classroom? And what is it that we can do to improve how we're feeling in the classroom? We also have a faculty charter that we've talked about. How do we want to feel as members of our school community? That we want to feel connected, we want to feel respected. But what do we do when that's not happening? How do we have those conversations to improve our school environment so that we can feel those positive emotions? In terms of the mood meter kind of sections off the different emotions in terms of high energy, low energy. And what I've seen teachers do is actually put on the tops of tests and quizzes, how are you feeling right now? Where would you put yourself on the mood meter? So students say things like, right now, I'm feeling very tired. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling really positive. And it kind of provides the teacher an opportunity when they're reviewing the student work on the assessment to say, wow, this student usually is here, but I can see their emotions were impacting their performance on this assessment on this day. And it really allows the students students to kind of give the teacher a heads up of here's where I am today, and this might impact my performance today. Teachers also provide an opportunity, once the students write those words down, to just take a few deep breaths and think about how they can move to a positive place for success. And then the last thing I would just talk about is actually different from the ruler program, is a transitions program that we have implemented in our school. It's a opportunity if students are going out on, 10 to 15 day hospitalizations. 15 years ago, if they came back to school, we'd be like, okay, here's your makeup work, go back to class, not acknowledging the challenges they were facing. So now when we have students return from a hospitalization, we provide that they enter our transitions program where they work with clinicians such as Holly and with academic teachers to kind of refocus themselves to be successful as they slowly re-enter our school community, so we're not completely overwhelming them once again. And I'm sure Holly will talk a little bit more about the transitions program. But overall, in terms of the ruler program, providing a common language to have conversations and kind of a structure to do that has been very impactful for us.
Thanks for sharing that. We'll go right straight to Holly to follow up on that.
Yeah, sure. I also think it's what is great about any social emotional learning program is teachers can take pieces that feel like very manageable to them. Some teachers don't feel comfortable talking about emotions in a certain way, but maybe they start class with a short 5-minute mindfulness or meditation exercise. So really helping teachers and students to understand that social, emotional, that aspect of their life is just as important as the academic rat race that we all find ourselves in sometimes. So we've had teachers, like I said, they've built in mindfulness moments. We've had teachers who've built in, I was helping a student the other day with a homework assignment, and the first question was, what or who are 3 things that you're grateful for? Because there's a much research about the impact of gratitude on social emotional health and well-being. So that teacher on their own decided, I'm not just going to start off with, the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to sort of help kids feel a little bit more comfortable and take a minute to pause and reflect. And then I'll get to the academic stuff later, but I want to lay the groundwork for a safe, comfortable, calm place. So those are just a couple of things that I thought I would add. Also, teachers offering more choices in assignments. Not everybody can stand up and do an oral presentation. Some people love it. The people on this panel obviously don't mind doing it because we're all here, but there are people who would be really freaked out by what we're doing right now, and they would shut down and they would not be able to show the amount of knowledge that they have. So a teacher being willing to say, okay, this oral presentation is freaking you out, but I don't want you to fail. I want you to be able to, I want to know what you know. So is there a different way that you can show me your knowledge? So giving teachers the freedom to try different things, to come out of the box, and to not be afraid to explore things and to feel confident that, not only are they helping kids with their social emotional learning, but they're also helping maybe a student who would have just flown under the radar finally kind of feel comfortable enough to come out and share what's going on with them. And just to piggyback off of what Trish was talking about with our transition program, we have had many students who've been in the hospital for mental health crisis reasons, and just offering students a safe and calm place to come back into. And I would even argue that not even with a hospitalization, when a student has just had a bad day or a bad moment, offering them time and space to come back and get themselves centered and feel supported and know that, you've had a bad moment or you've had a bad day or you've experienced a loss or a trauma or or some other major life impacting event, that we don't just expect you to just hop back up on the horse, that everybody needs help, every person needs support, and we're here to do that and to help them back so that they feel successful and empowered, and ready to learn and kind of be in charge of their own life again. And
great.
I just think having a common language in a school around social emotional health is important, so that teachers, counselors, administrators are all speaking the same language and valuing this part of our kids' development is important.
Absolutely. What is, moving over, Jason, to your school, what's working? What are some of the strategies that are working?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle. I think in order to address this issue across the board, we have to address the adults as well. And so I'm going to focus on a couple things there. First is just enabling the conversation, and making sure that the school is a place where the community can have this conversation. One of Jeff's partners is a former Supreme Court Justice in New Hampshire, Judge John Broderick, who experienced in his own life mental illness in his family. And he's come to speak to students over the years. And his goal is basically the idea that if his goal is someday I would speak up about a mental health issue with the same level of comfort I would speak up about having a headache or having a physical symptom or a physical illness, that there's no difference ultimately between emotional and physical health. But we've also hosted a number of forums with community members. And basically it's a matter of just saying who in the community can speak to mental health, well-being, and emotional support in a good way. And we're doing it right now on a Zoom call, so there's no reason you can't put together a virtual forum right now. So for example, we have a police chief in town who's made a big push on mental well-being after experiencing some suicides on the police force. And so we looked through and found some people to do that. We've also worked with Jeff and worked with others on programs for teachers and for parents. We find it's really important to have that conversation constantly with our faculty about stress and well-being, about the cumulative effects of the demand that we place on students. We use a resource from an author by the name of Tim Elmore. His organization is called Growing Leaders. And we've had them in as professional development speakers for our faculty to talk about the social media climate that our students face. So I think those are some things on the adult level that we've used. On our student side, we are fortunate that we have a whole person mission that we're trying to develop students emotionally, socially, spiritually, physically, as well as academically. And so constantly pushing students to diversify in what they're involved in, so they're not just one act, but multifaceted people. We are always looking for opportunities for prayer, reflection, meditation for our students. Our counseling department this year has been putting together a wellness page, so if a student feels stressed or is having difficulty coping with whatever's in front of them, that they have some resources to go to. A lot of this fits nicely. One of the questions is, where do you do it? A lot of this fits nicely into an advisory program, which is a program that's still developing for us, but our students have an adult who follows them through 4 years, be it a teacher or staff member, and those things fit very well in as well. When it comes to COVID and the recent challenges, I think it's important to give students agency and ownership over it, and the understanding that they are part of the solution to the problem, and that their own acts can help to improve the outcome for the whole community. So we've got the motto that COVID stops with a cardinal, and that idea that we all own that process, and that we're going to try to maximize normalcy and structure and accountability, but that they also play a role in enhancing that outcome. I think some sense of control is important. So there's a couple thoughts.
Thank you for bringing up the importance of reaching out to the adults as well. It's critical. The next two, I'm going to put a spin on this. How have you used music to help kids at this point? Because I know both Jeff and Joe have a very strong interest in music, and it is a way to reach kids that is pretty special. So I'm just curious, and this is not in the script at all. You have to just put your thoughts together right now. Let's start with you, Joe.
Well, thank you for bringing music into it. Music has been through the ages considered to be one of the universal languages that most of us can connect to, no matter where you're from. And with that, one of the things I've used is just being able to have kids say, what songs get you or evoke certain emotions? Do you have songs that you listen to that can help you to relax, that help you go to sleep, that help you to get into a better mood? We can use music to help us evoke emotions, or even help us to reduce certain emotions that we're having. So if I'm feeling a certain way, I might play a certain song, either by listening to actually playing it on an instrument, me refocus, or to help me calm down, or to help me pour out whatever emotions I have. Song composition, teaching kids basic song structure and chord patterns. Music has changed over the past few decades, and that is a little bit more minimal in terms of what goes into it. Not to mean that it's not any less relevant, but it's an exciting opportunity because, a new aspiring young musician who's really hungry to learn songs can actually learn a bunch of songs in a very short amount of time, because there are some very popular songs that are just 4 or 5 chords and can get you through the entire song. So with that, teaching them basic song structure so that they can feel successful in creating something of their own, creating their own song lyrics. Talk about how some of the best songs in the world, the most impactful songs, are about some of the worst things in the world, about losing people, about losing love, or not having someone love you back, or losing a friend, or struggling. And how do we use that as a way to be, have that as an expression of what we're feeling? So those are just a few examples that I use.
I'm curious, and this will be I'm going to ask each of you this question as we wrap up, but are you comfortable or confident that you're able to reach all of your students, or how do you handle the students that are falling through the crack?
That's a great question. As teachers, I think we hope that we reach everyone. I think one of the things that's helped me is trying to ask questions and find out more about students, so I can find out what they're into. If I can find out what they're into, then I can possibly find points in a lesson or through songs that helps to build bridges to them. If I feel like I'm not reaching somebody and I know that they're into sports, I might, on purpose, tell personal stories about my life, about some of my failures or successes as a student athlete, and in hopes that will reach them. Because I think, going back to what some of the other folks said, that a lot of times social and emotional learning it starts with us first. I need to be on point when I come to work, and tools and approaches like Ruler sometimes are more important for me in moments, so that I can be effective and therefore be able to be in the place that I need to reach other people, either socially, emotionally, as a teacher, and musically and creatively.
Thank you, Joe. Jeff, I know that music's important part of how you reach kids as well. How does music work for you?
Thanks, Jim. Let me do that really quickly, and then I want to piggyback on something Jason said, if it's okay. I mean, I've always loved music and found myself singing easily through elementary school. I see kids are jammed up with the fear of embarrassment. So when I'm working with a hockey team right now, I get them singing in the first session, just as a metaphor to crack the barrier of the fear of failure. So when you get 22 teenage boys singing Sweet Home Chicago at the top of their lungs, it does something to just relax them. Because we all went through experiences when we were kids. We didn't have outcome fever. We didn't worry about our appearance. We went home from school and didn't go on Snapchat. These kids get no break from the 24/7 judgment. So the more music, the more inspiration, the more silliness, the more fun that we can have with kids, the better. One. Second, Jason mentioned Judge Broderick, who I'm honored to say is a friend and associate of ours here at the Reconnection Project, which is a fancy big name for the little company my wife and I have started with some colleagues. We did a mental health forum hosted by Jason at Bishop Girton. I was just going to click the if I can do this right. There's the link, and there's so much good stuff in this chat. I've been trying to keep up with it unsuccessfully. And people are adding, we're saying things and great people are adding, here's a link to that thing. So if you watch that forum, you'll see Judge Broderick at the beginning, who has spoken to 385,000 students in Northern New England and hugged, he estimates, 4,000 of them. And he gets a standing ovation. Jason has heard him, and maybe others have heard Judge Broderick. The kids stand up and clap for him because he simply says, hey, boys and girls, I heard you're really stressed. That's okay. My son went through a crisis. We want your help. We want to talk about it. They stand up and clap. John always says, I'm 73. I'm their grandfather. If somebody's grandfather came into school when I was at Wakefield High, none of us would have listened. So I think if I don't get another opportunity to speak, the bottom line is we as educators must do two things. We must just acknowledge that kids, and we all now are kind of in a crisis of disconnection. And we have to enlist the help of parents. I saw so many questions. How do I get parents involved? Judge Broderick and I would love to come and help you host a forum similar to the one we did with Jason at Bishop Girton for minimal and perhaps no charge. Judge Broderick works for Dartmouth Hitchcock. He's paid. This has been my life's work and all our life's work. I've known Jim for 25 years. We're all working with kids on a daily basis. And I think we have unbelievable power as a body of educators to just name this thing. It's a crisis. It's a crisis. The suicide rate shows us, the CDC youth risk behavioral surveys in this country, I don't know about others around the world, show us, 40% of kids on average say I'm sad and hopeless for 2 weeks running. That's before COVID. COVID's only going to reveal the fissures in the foundation. We're the masons that can repair those fissures. Thank you.
We are living the rat race because it is now 1 hour into the webinar, and basically we have run out of time. And what I find fascinating is there's at least one other topic hanging out there for another webinar. There may be several. I haven't been able to keep up with the chats the way my colleagues have, but this has certainly inspired a lot of very powerful responses. So this is where you have to be incredibly disciplined. You get one idea, you get to close with one thought, and then we will break out into the discussion groups, which were introduced at the beginning by Allison. So you get to go with one thought. I'm starting with you, Nikki, go.
Don't put me on the spot or anything. Well, I would just say that emotions matter, and we've heard it across the board from all of the panelists. They affect everything we do. And now more than ever is the time to pay attention to them, think about their impact, think if the ones that we're feeling are working for us. And if they're not working for us or our students, then what can we do to help ourselves and our students so that we feel the way that we want to feel, so that we can be most effective in our lives.
Excellent. That's a very good sentence. There you go. That was perfect. Trish.
I think it's important that everyone that comes into the school building brings empathy with them for one another. I also feel as a school leader, it's important that there are strong structures and supports in the schoolhouse for students and for teachers, and that we do make every effort at all times to meet the need of every single child.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly.
I guess in a word, just community. We all need to work together to help kids feel a part of something, to be a part of the community. That three-legged stool that we talked about, with the parents, the educators, and the students. If students feel like we're all on their team, that we're all there for them, it makes such a huge difference. We didn't talk a lot about the parent piece today. But I've been blessed to work with some wonderful parents and some parents who've needed help. So I think just working together, consulting, collaborating is the key.
Great, thank you. Joe.
Work together as a team, be in it together. Eat right, sleep right, get your mind right, get your body right. That's exercise, and get your spirit right. The more you look for happiness, in my experience, it tends to elude you. So get the things in your life that you need to get in line, reduce the stress in your life. And I'm going to piggyback on what Holly said, gratitude. If you can take just a moment each day and find someone or something that you're happy for, be thankful for it, and think about how that person or that thing has made you a better person, made you into who you want to be, or shaped your life. And that is it for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. Jeff, one sentence.
One sentence. Let me quote from the Canned Heat tune from the 60s. Come on, let's work together, every boy, child, woman, and man. Reconnection is the key. Acknowledgement of the crisis. Those are the keys, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jason, you are the closer.
If you create the conversation among adults, social emotional learning will happen within the classrooms and among the students.
I want to thank you all very much for this inspirational moment, reflecting on the needs of our students and of our adults. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Allison, and I'm again very grateful for your taking the time, and deeply appreciative. Allison, back to you.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for your comments. There were so many questions in the Q&A that were answered by panelists. So I hope you're able to take a look at those. So for myself and Jim and all of the staff at NEASC, along with our panelists, we want to thank you so much for joining us today and wish you a very safe and happy rest of your week.